I'm Tyler Ellefson. All my friends call me Kermit. Otherwise, most people know me as Larry Johnson. And this was my '86 BMW E30. I think my whole passion for cars started like any other kid does. You know, you have Hot Wheels and stuff like that, and then you have BMX bikes, skateboards, like whatever it is. Anything that you can add and subtract parts and kind of customize to your own liking. And then Need for Speed came around. I had played a lot of Need for Speed when I was a kid, a lot of Midnight Club, stuff like that. Just, I don't know, it was something attracted me to just being able to customize these things and all the different options, and then having to do things efficiently. I guess as far as cost efficiency or power efficiency and blah blah blah. And then as soon as Forza became a thing, that's kind of when I started to get into drifting. Getting on Forza and actually being able to set up your cars and actually being able to do what you're not supposed to be able to do in cars in real life, I guess. So then, like I said, after Forza became a thing, I started getting into drifting and just watching all these videos on YouTube, back when YouTube, you know, wasn't so big. Just watching all these videos and thinking, I want to do that. Like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen, you know, and I think I had a few different cars once I hit high school. My first car was a '97 BMW 318i, so not really a whole lot of power to get in trouble with, but definitely in the snow you can have enough. So I got into a 318i and then noted that I needed a little bit more power, or, you know, something a little bit better suited to get sideways on dry tarmac versus, you know, snow and slush. So I ended up getting a 5MGE swapped 87 RX-7, FC RX-7, and just started hooning around town. I was probably 17, just getting into trouble. Got pulled over a couple times, and thankfully local police liked me and they let me off. But so that was pretty much my first introduction to actually getting sideways at speed and how aggressive it can actually be. But it's addicting. It's as soon as the adrenaline starts pumping, it's the only thing you think about. Eventually I finally got my first E30 and it was all downhill from there. That was like the first car that I had an in-depth look at how to work on things. Ended up doing like a head gasket and timing belt and water pump and, you know, just basic maintenance that's a little bit more in-depth than I guess what most people would go into. And then it's the same thing. Winter comes around and snow hits the ground and you just can't go back. So then fast forward a few years after gaining some knowledge and some experience, old friend of mine moved back to Minnesota and he wanted to get into cars, and I was like, okay, it was the first time that somebody had actually approached me and wanted me to teach them about cars, and it just kind of blossomed from there into this shop that was filled with E30s. I mean, I think at one point in time we had 8 E30s in the shop, and then eventually, you know, after messing around and doing a couple swaps and just normal day-to-day shop things, I guess, we finally just both wanted to get into official drifting and not just hooning around your average corner in town and hoping that you're not going to get busted by the cops. So then we bought this $200 retired rally car, 86 E30. It ran and drove. Both the motor mounts were severed, and, you know, the tires didn't hold air, and there's a little bit of rust here and there, some patch panels made out of tin, and the typical things that you'd get from a $200 car. And finally, after it sat at the shop for about a week, I just looked at him and I was like, hey, do you want to do stupid shit to this? So then something that everybody wants to do is just chop it into a truck, you know, and in my head at the time I was thinking, yeah, just get rid of all the weight in the rear and it'll break loose a little bit easier than a stock E30, but I feel like that actually hurt us more than it helped us, because it throws off the pivot point of the car a little bit, and it made it react a little bit more funky than a normal E30. But still, I mean, either which way, just the fact that it was, how cheap can we do this? You know, it was, we have a $200 car, it needs to be different. You know, there's tons of E30s, you'll see tons of 240s and E30s and, you know, anything, you know, FCRX7s, Miatas, whatever it is that's drifting. But you've never seen an E30 that's made into a Ute, into a BMW Ute, if you will. Let's see. So when this thing started, it was just an 86 325 E model coupe. Nothing fancy about it. It was stock suspension with some snow tires on it that previous owners just took it to some local rally racing, and that was pretty much their only purpose for the car. So me and my shop partner picked it up for $200 and started chopping it up, just looking for something to do, you know, something out of the ordinary, if you will. And one thing kind of led to another, and then it was just, let's keep throwing parts at this thing that we happen to have laying around. So originally it had a 2.7 M20 in it, so an M20 B27 in it. We pulled that out, ripped it down to the block, put a baffle in the oil pan, put an 885 head on it with a 274 cam and an SS Squid chip to account for that. And it ran great. But after so long, I kind of wanted more power. I ended up buying the other half from my shop partner, so then it was officially my car. And I wanted a little bit more power, so I purchased a M30 B35 swap. I got about halfway through the swap and then had to abandon ship because the event was coming up within a week, so I ended up picking up another M20 swap, which is what's in here now. For 250 bucks, I drove 45 minutes to pick it up and stuffed it in the back of an E34 wagon, brought it back to the shop and stuck it in the car. So now it is just a stock M20 B25 out of a normal 325i or IS E30. It's got a welded 4.1 diff in the rear. It originally had some really nice stance coilovers on it that I ended up robbing for a different E30 that I sold. So now it's on Turner Motorsports lowering springs and Bilstein shocks, some 16x9 fake STR wheels, and that was pretty much it. Other than that, we bought a pre-bent cage, welded that in really quick, which we did improperly, which is okay, it's all learning experience. And steering wheel attack, some harnesses, and we were pretty much good to go. You know, the paint job was free, the suspension came from a different car, and almost every, I want to say 95% of this car is spare parts. So it wasn't too much out of our wallet to get into drifting, which I think is the main hurdle that a lot of people have. Is they don't want to spend, you know, $3,000, $4,000, or $5,000 on a vehicle just to have that risk of, you know, smashing it into a wall, because you don't know what you're doing at first, obviously. So it's a nice way to kind of get our feet wet without dumping too much of our money into it, and rather just some spare parts and some labor. But so after a couple years of use, I kind of came to quarter life crisis, if you will, and felt like I was drowning in bills. So I sold everything I had, except for a daily and my scooter, and sold everything I had, and I was going to pay off my tools and a different load that I had, just to kind of consolidate my finances and kind of get my head on straight a little bit better, or get my head on straight and just live a little easier instead of paycheck to paycheck. So I sold this to a buddy of mine. Pretty much said, yeah, if you ever want to buy it back, get a hold of me. And I was like, okay, cool, it's going to be in safe hands. He said he was just going to park it for the winter. And 2 to 3 weeks later, I got a Snapchat of it smashed in a impound lot. So he crashed it, ended up in the impound. Different buddy of mine bought it from the impound, took it home, was going to save it, realized it was past the point of no return, not really worth saving at that point. So then he offered it back to me, and now it's sitting in my garage again. So at this point in time, I'm pretty much just robbing anything that I can off of it for the new project. Interior strut tower bars, reinforced front subframe, wheels and tires maybe, and so on and so forth. Anything that I can get off of it, really. But the plan afterwards is I'm just going to back half it and make it into a little trailer that I can put my camping setup on, all my spares, all my tools. So eventually it will be useful again, and Lenny the BMW Ute will live on. Yeah, I mean, I'm Tyler Staupy / Kermit / Larry Johnston, and thanks for listening to my story. Keep drifting fun.